Hi, I'm Nicole Scott, and this is Don Dahlmann. And today we're going to be talking about the potential of investment into hydrogen because there are a lot of new opportunities with this green renewable resources because we have to start to look at how we're going to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies. And there's a lot of opportunity with hydrogen.
Oh yeah, they are. I mean, first of all, if you have an old system that is not going to be fully replaced, but it's going to be partly replaced with a new system, that creates opportunities. I mean, if you just think about business cases, just create new business cases. You have old companies, like dealing with their business model, but then you have new companies coming up dealing with their business model. But so there are possibilities and a lot. I mean, I'm in the startup scene since a couple of years. I know it in Berlin very well. And I know that a lot of companies are looking for startups in the hydrogen scene or technology around the technology around the hydrogen, because there is a lot of happening. As we said in our episode before, hydrogen is a bit behind after solar and other things. And the other thing is, like, creating hydrogen is one thing. The other thing is where are the use cases where you can put it in. So there's like a huge universe of things that you can use it. And hydrogen is going to be used like in cities, in trams, in boats, in cars, in energy storage. It can be transported in pipelines. It can be transported in trucks. It can be transported in ships. So you can use it like in so many different ways. It's just a whole new universe of business opportunities.
And hydrogen itself actually presents a lot of opportunities because of its physical nature.
Yeah.
So during IFA's TechDay, I learned about one of the startups called Hydrogenius, and they specialized in transporting liquid hydrogen. Because at a certain temperature, hydrogen becomes a liquid, and then you can physically transport it on a ship. Australia is looking at becoming one of the world's mass exporters of hydrogen. So creating a tanker that will physically transport hydrogen from Australia to Europe, right? There's all of these new ways that we have to evolve away from this fuel-dependent concept of how we create, use, and transport energy.
No, if you look back when oil and fuel became a thing, I mean, oil was a thing like a couple of hundred years, but when fuel became a thing, when cars came up and you finally needed gasoline to power them, look how many companies like made huge amount of money. Standard Oil, I think, from Rockefeller is like the best example for it. So they were entrepreneurs at their time. And I think now we see entrepreneurs also going into the hydrogen revolution. And I think it's the same. You can become, if you start now, maybe you will become the next Rockefeller. What I want to say is there are possibilities. And you don't have to, and you have to grab them and don't underestimate what kind of huge change we are facing in the future with hydrogen.
And I think the thing that should become clear across this whole series around hydrogen that we're doing is that it's all about a larger picture of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's about companies that are actually taking hold of that entire ecosystem and going at it systematically level by level.
And we see that there is a strong need to innovate in all aspects of mobility. So not just passenger cars, of course, but high performance vehicles, motorsport, but even then moving out to areas like commercial transport and shipping and the urban air mobility. So, we're making strategic investments in smaller, fast moving companies that will help Hyundai become more of a tech company rather than just a car company. We are working with companies and with partners in other areas on EV battery technology, charging infrastructure, as well as producing green hydrogen. And I say that's very much about how we're transforming away from being a car manufacturer to a smart mobility solution provider. And probably the best example we can give of that is Cradle. I don't know how much you know about our Hyundai Innovation Accelerator group, but they have 5 offices around the world. We're in Seoul, Beijing, we're in Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, and they're in Berlin. And Cradle's all about investing in startups to drive innovation.
So there are a lot of different industries and potential for hydrogen.
Yes, I mean, startups is one thing. They're starting to do the research and to do little things, and also developing e-commerce solutions maybe is the next step. Before that, you have to do something else. I mean, we are still talking about climate change. even in this episode, we're talking about making money with hydrogen, but it's also like the climate change that stands behind it. And we know that we have to do something. And one of the worst polluters around the world is the heavy industry, because, you know, steel, we need steel. It's not that you just can shut off the steel fabric and say, hey, bye. It's like, we don't need you anymore. No, you need it. And they are powered by nuclear or by fossil fuel, by coal. So you need to have like a different solution for it. And we learned also when we visited Vattenfall in Hamburg that they actually developed a solution to have a green steel factory in Sweden, which is run by hydrogen, more or less. So there is no CO2 emissions by producing the steel. And there are a lot of other opportunities and other companies working on this kind of green steel and green production in heavy industries. And I think there is a lot of left. I mean, think of all just drive around with your car and see all the factories around your place. Then you know we have a long way.
But I think we also have to consider just exactly how we're going to transition a lot of these traditional businesses to being based on renewables. So if we start with, say, energy producers, like Alpiq in Switzerland was making that shift. Vattenfall is also making that shift. If you look at traditional oil and gas companies, right, they're not going to go out of business because they just have to make the transition from producing CO2 heavy, fuels to producing renewables.
At our foundation, we are selecting and labeling technological solutions that protect the environment in a profitable way. So we observe the technologies under the angle of the feasibility. It has to be credible today, not a vague idea for the future, but really something for today. It needs to protect the environment, and it needs to be financially profitable for the company who produces it and for the consumer. And we see that more and more hydrogen will also go not only in the engine of cars, trucks, ships and airplanes, but hydrogen is also going to be used to make steel. It's a completely new industry that is raising from the hydrogen technology. And more than this, there has been some reports showing that if you invest in these new technologies, you create much more jobs than when you invest in the oil and fossil energy industry.
Exactly, and that goes the same in a way. I mean, it goes for like every company that has contact with fossil fuels in a way for the future. You have to see where is like another solution that we can use. Car manufacturers are basically the same because for them it's like on both sides. So first of all, they produce a product that is relying heavily on fossil fuels. So what they're going to do in the future, we talked about in the first and second episode, that there are solutions with hydrogen for mobility. The other thing is they produce the car. So they need a lot of energy for their facilities. So there is also the point to what they're going to do. So how do they get CO2 neutral in the future they have to? And I think if you see this whole thing, you see a revolution, an industrial revolution rolling up on us, which goes far and deeper than I think a lot of people think.
While Don and I were in Switzerland, we actually had the opportunity to speak with Mark Freymueller, who was there to kind of present this new hydrogen fleet and the keys to all the grocery stores. And it was just fantastic because it was a non-subsidized government business model for all of these grocery stores who got together to create kind of a collective to go towards hydrogen. And what we sort of see through this is that it is economically viable for small businesses to make this transition towards a green hydrogen society.
And I think the Swiss business case, especially because there's a road tax which was established about 20 years ago, and you do not have to pay this road tax if you're running an emission-free truck. And we're talking about quite some significant money here. We're talking about 60,000 euros roundabout per year per truck. And since we're not selling the vehicles, we're utilizing a pay-per-use model. That means that the in this fee per kilometer, everything is included. And I really mean everything except for the driver, but also, I mean, from service and after sales and spare part availability and insurance and so forth, but also the hydrogen itself. So we're really going down to the cost per kilometer. And we can factor in that this tax is not to be paid, so that the cost per kilometer is the same. And then another advantage beside of this road tax exemption is higher diesel costs in Switzerland compared to other European countries. So the benchmark we need to meet is higher than in, let's say, Germany or so.
So this was a lot about theory, and that was a lot about big business cases for big company. But what about, like what I said in the beginning, with startups? So where are the business opportunity for startups? And you bet there are a lot. Just listen to Sabastian Justus Schmidt. He founded Enapter, a company that builds an electrolyzer, and he explains how he wants to make money.
The question is, what is the price hydrogen should have that you enlarge can start to produce or to bring in hydrogen systems. So, and we believe that it would be €1.50 will be the first pricing point. But we believe that in a few years later, it will come to around 50 cents. And then it will be very interesting for the world, because here then we have really big game changer everywhere.
So that was Sabastian explaining us his business model, and it's exciting. I mean, if you're a founder now, if you want to like invest into something, if you have some money left over, I would have like a close look into the hydrogen market, because things are going to happen there.
And what I find really interesting is that Hyundai has Cradle, which invests into kind of new mobility concepts.
Yeah.
But then also we talked to so many startups that were struggling to find funding, right?
Yeah,
and went to a bank and sort of went around, and then we're trying to figure out like what the best partner for them was, to kind of roll out their ideas. And so I think that there is so much opportunity for companies that have new and fresh ideas when it comes to green and renewable. Like you've mentioned before, BlackRock has, a new policy that says that they can't invest into a company that's not CO2 neutral.
So this is so interesting because it's for founders of all ages. I mean, you don't have to be young or very old or whatever. You can be in every age. What you have to have is like this kind of sense of entrepreneurship to seeing that something is changing, because hydrogen is like has this whole approach that is looking at all verticals, as you always say, and looking in all business cases, and you can use it in so many versatile ways.
So we're not done talking about hydrogen. Don and I learned so much over the last few months that we have a few more topics to dig into. So I love the holistic approach of hydrogen. And in this series, we're going to cover a lot of different topics. So be sure to check them all out. But up next, we're discussing the holistic nature of hydrogen.